Well, the election of Hakainde Hichilema as the 8th president of Zambia since 1964 certainly set to galvanize opposition parties through the continent, Sbu.
That's correct, Kathy, and it's sixth time lucky for him. He has contested every election since 2006, and already we have heard Musimaimane there speaking earlier, and also the EFF joined the fray, also congratulating him, saying that his win shows that there is value in fighting and contesting elections, and obviously I guess this is also good for Zambia as a country, given the fact that their democratic scorecard does look good, and the fact that Hichilema will be the 8th president since independence in 1964. That's when Kenneth Kaunda took over as the Zambian president, and we know that Kenneth Kaunda was the longest serving president for 27 years, and I know that some people may also remember a guy called Guy Scott. He was the shortest serving president, where he served for 3 months following the death, passing rather, of President Michael Chilufya. But obviously his win and the fact that there have been 3 parties that have dominated the political space in Zambia, and Hichilema's party, this is the first time that they are winning an election, and I'm sure that on its own is something that will power on and galvanize opposition parties in the continent. But to talk about this more, Kathy, I am joined now by Dr. Harvey, who is the Director of Research at Good Governance Africa, and he has been following the Zambian election. Dr. Harvey, looking at the victory of Hichilema and the acceptance this afternoon by President Lungu, where he conceded defeat, let's start here. What do you think his victory means for opposition politics on the continent and also in the SADC region?
Good evening. Thanks for having me on the show. Excellent question. In a nutshell, this is excellent news for opposition politics, particularly in Zambia, but also across the continent. Democracies thrive principally on the grounds of there being viable opposition. And there's been a dearth of viable opposition in many of our democracies. And the fact that today Zambia's opposition has really gained a significant victory is a source of both promise and hope for opposition politics across our region, embattled as it is.
Now, this is a man who has contested every election since 2006, and with every election he kept inching forward in terms of that voter share. And there was that big arrest, I think Musimaimane referenced it earlier, where he was arrested in 2017 and spent 4 months in prison. He was charged with treason for not having given way to the presidential motorcade. How do you think that incident influenced his popularity?
Well, I think hugely, and I think what it shows us and what it showed Zambian voters on the day is that this is a man with strong character, who has big match temperament under pressure, and while some have regarded his lack of charisma as perhaps being an underlying reason for his lack of victory in the past, I think what he has shown is that he had fortitude under severe duress, and has never given up. And for those of us who remember Churchill saying never give up, I think that competing in 6 elections and eventually gaining victory is testimony to the man's character. He won 1 million more votes, even just over that, since the last election, whereas the Patriotic Front led by Lungu pretty much maintained their vote share from the previous election. So this is a monumental effort, and I do think that the arrest galvanized Hichilema into really realizing that he had to step up, and he certainly has done that, and Zambians have rewarded him both with high voter turnout and, despite the odds, a resounding victory for the UPND.
Now, I asked you earlier what this means for opposition politics, but I mean, given his election and the fact that this is not your typical politician who comes with struggle credentials or has broken away from some of the parties as we have seen in the past, this is a businessman, one of the most successful businessmen in Zambia. Do you think his election means anything for our politics on the continent, or is it too early to tell?
No, it does mean something significant because it gives hope to opposition politicians and parties elsewhere on the continent that are struggling under, frankly, similar conditions in many respects. And it was very interesting in this Zambian election to note, for instance, that Lungu had essentially started crying foul about the elections being unfree and unfair. And the opposition bound together in opposing that statement in Zambia, standing firm and saying, yes, they are unfair and they may not be free. But that is because of the way that the PF has behaved. And they've created a repressive authoritarian state, especially over the last 5 years. And despite that intimidation, despite the odds being stacked against the opposition and heavily in favor of the incumbent, HH won out. And it is unusual to see this kind of consolidation and unity among opposition parties within Zambia. But I think it's a lesson in similar ways to what Malawi showed us, although they required court intervention, that opposition politics can win the day. Now, of course, there are nuances across the region. Opposition politics in Zimbabwe, for instance, faces severe onslaught of ZANU-PF essentially having both infiltrated and obliterated parts of the opposition by subverting parliamentary mechanisms and by co-opting and frankly bribing the judiciary to stay in favor of ZANU. So it has slightly different challenges there. But what Zambia has shown us, and of course it has a history of excellent elections, is that this is something absolutely worth fighting for. And it's a lesson not only to opposition politicians across the region, but also to the world, to support the structure of democracy that holds opposition parties and aids them in building their oppositional tactics, ultimately with a view to being able to govern well, which is what we at GGA are after. It's critical to have a free and fair election. So that's first prize, and we need international support for that so that we can generate genuinely free, fair and credible elections across the region. And then, of course, on that ticket, on a foundation of election victory, we need to get serious about governance, and Zambia will have its work cut out for it now. But a resounding victory is a good platform from which to address these governance challenges.
Sure. Dr. Ross Harvey, thank you very much for your time. He's the Director of Research at Good Governance Africa, and there you have it, looking at the outcome of those elections in Zambia. And we do know that African leaders are meeting in Malawi.